On the back of round one, do you think there is a significant advantage for those sides who played in round zero?
It's a really good point because I would have said yes until Fremantle beat Brisbane
Yes.
quite easily up over in WA, but more focused on the Bulldogs and Melbourne, which the game I did, and there was a significant difference between the way, and I'm talking probably more third quarter as the game started to grind away. It was hot, that the way Melbourne mids looked compared to the Western Bulldogs mids at that particular part of the game. And around stoppage, boundary throw-ins, the Dogs had their hands on hips. You know, you pull your shorts down because you're just absolutely spent towards your knees. And they were on their haunches where Melbourne were up and pointing and directing and setting up. And but I'm not talking about one player. I'm talking about the collective group of mids. I know Sanders is young, but even to see the Bont at times and Treloar, these more experienced, hardened bodies still in their first game of the year in the serious condition of AFL football, they were spent before Melbourne were. And maybe that is because Melbourne already had that one serious run under their belt at the highest of levels, not community series practice games.
Yeah, I don't think you can put fatigue into the basket of what happened over in the West because they were horrible from probably 15 minutes into the first quarter. They just got they got off to a lucky start, a good start, and then they just put the flag in the sand.
But in saying that as well, I think over the last few years, the Dogs have had some trouble with Melbourne's mids, regardless of whether there's fatigue or not in the game. And that's something that, you know, they need to address in particular this week with what they're coming up against from a Gold Coast Suns perspective and the form that their midfield's in. But to see Melbourne's first goal of the game come out the front again and break 50, Petrarca Devine kick an absolute ripping goal, and then to see, I suppose, the leaders of Melbourne, in particular Max Gawn, after being portrayed in the media as having a poor game the week before against Brodie Grundy, really stepped things up and play an excellent game of footy. As much as Tim English played okay and got enough football, his impact on the game wasn't there like a Max Gawn. And Stephen May, I thought his performance was outstanding. First goal against was Aaron Norton, who got him high, wrapped around, took a great mark. After that, he said no more.
It was like the Dogs were kicking it to May.
Yeah. Exactly, but his aggression at the contest and the way he was supporting his teammates airily and on the ground, and it was the cleanest I've seen Stephen May sometime below his knees. Normally, he's sort of the low ball, he'll fumble. He didn't fumble on the weekend against the Bulldogs forwards.
Jono, outside of the two Sydney teams, is there a side that's actually exciting you at the present time, or is it just a bit even?
I think it's more even than it. There's no one that really jumps out. Like the Swannies were brilliant to watch. Seriously, and we did their game, Gerard. It was so good to see them live and just see how well they're moving the ball. GWS were also. I know they played North Melbourne, who are a level below, but still at moments in that game, you just went, wow, look how well they're moving the ball. Look at the presence they've got in each line now, GWS, and that they've got just key players that are setting them up everywhere, and you've got some youngsters that are flowing through their lineup.
Freo probably was the big overachiever, but unfortunately
but we're still question marks on, okay, well, we're still got to see this for a bulk of time from Fremantle.
But I was excited by that victory. I mean, it was significant, but the loss of Cox is a shock. And I looked at Caleb Sarong's draft year again today, and it was amazing.
He had 23 disposals halfway through the second quarter.
He was a captain of one of the Victorian teams, and he was let go through to pick 8. I mean, Fremantle had pick 7 and 8, so they could have swapped and changed those with Hayden Young. But those two players are club transforming.
But their midfield was not as good last year. Like 2022, they were awesome, and then they
didn't cover
for whatever reason the individual, I think we spoke about this a lot last year, the individual played well for Fremantle in their midfield. So Sarong might play well, but the other three didn't. And then Brayshaw the next week would play well, Sarong would. And they never got it together collectively. They got it together collectively in their first outing, which the confidence for that will be enormous. I think Jackson was very, very good around the ground for them as well. So there's a lot to like if Fremantle's midfield can remain as strong as what we witnessed on the weekend.
John, I got to speak to you about the Dogs because I've been as strong probably as anyone on them. In terms of the aspects that I'm concerned about, I want to get your thoughts and break down just a couple of areas that continually be a concern for me. So So maybe it's modern football, and maybe teams are more likely to score heavily quickly than they ever have been before. And we've seen momentum swings. Brisbane give up 46, points, and Gold Coast what they've done in the first couple of rounds. How concerned are you about the inability to stop run-ons of goals? Because only Hawthorn North and West Coast since 2021 have conceded more 5 goals against in one stretch.
In a row,
Yeah.
in a stretch.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I suppose overall, like even last year, overall, and we went through it at Fox in the preseason, Gerard, where it was where do the sides sit in the window of defence and attack, and the Bulldogs still sit in the right sweet spot across the season in the defensive window of stopping the opposition. But you're right, Kane. I agree with what you're saying in terms of just that run-on effect and how that is stopped. And that's just something they can only answer that. The personnel out there can only answer that in terms of the way that they're instructed to do things differently. Maybe it is if they kick 2 or 3 in a row. Maybe it is a Norton goes behind the wall. Maybe is that what we're trying to see, Kane? A shift in, rather than trying to score that next goal, a shift in position by somebody to restrict that next goal for the Bulldogs to do.
I think
Heiny says you haven't got enough interceptors. And Norton would be an interceptor.
Oh, absolutely, he would be. Or whether it's a Sam Darcy who comes in and plays forward, but can play that role. The Bulldogs' wingmen, unfortunately, aren't pushing back aerially to assist in the air at all. So they need to find a change in that potentially at a point in game where they have got 2 or 3 kicked against them, so it doesn't become 5 and 6 that Kane's talking about. It stays there for a period of time, and then they slowly get the momentum potentially back in their way. But you're right, it's who's going to make that shift, because if it's Liam Jones, Karmas isn't there yet as much as he showed a little bit again on the weekend from his aerial ability. But outside of those two, Ed Richards can do it in the air, but we haven't seen that.
But the damning stat last night was Heiny had the Bulldogs in the company of North Melbourne and the West Coast Eagles from winning the ball back. I mean, it's not just a one person going to change this. This has got to be system as well.
That's got to be system, and that's got to be the collective, rather than waiting on 1 or 2 of their star players to actually do something around the ball.
Clearly pressure on the kick.
Pressure on the kick, pressure around the ball, all those things it needs to adjust, because that's just something you can't hide from in terms of where you sit in the competition for one of the most important stats in the game, and a huge adjustment needs to happen.
And I guess the other thing is just defensively. You've sort of explained that, but on the weekend it was alarming with I think it was 129 in the end, uncontested marks. Jack Billings took 15, and the ability to...
It's a lot, isn't it?
It's a huge number. And I mean,
huge amount.
It's a basic measure of team defense. Even sort of back when I was playing, keep them under 80 uncontested
Under 80,
marks.
you're right, Kane. We were the same.
Yeah.
A couple of the teams you'd play against, it wasn't all the teams back then, but it was a couple that would chip the ball around a lot. I think Hawthorn might have been one of them, where you go, got to keep them under 90 today, and you're actually in the game. But what that means of keeping them under 90 is supporting each other and working to get to the outside first, where they would generally take these marks. Like Billings taking 15, a lot of those are wide. How is he getting there first? Why isn't there support there before that, or chasing someone down with a bit more intent so they do go long down the line?
That's the issue. You want to get them to go long.
Those sort of things, yeah, exactly.
So you can get the ball back.
That's yes, partly structure, but it's also partly that mental approach to the game of having a real drill down on 1 or 2 focus areas that can assist you in team performance, rather than getting smashed like they did.
Yeah, we'll move on, because I don't want to talk about the Western Bulldogs the whole time, and it's an really interesting game this weekend. Then they've got West Coast.
Oh, it's a huge game. It's a huge game in Ballarat this weekend.
That.
Should be packed out. It's massive.
North had a couple of debutants. What'd you like?
It's so good. I love when you go to the Footy Live, Kane, and you actually get to see these youngsters. And the first thing you look at is their first couple of contests, how comfortable they are going to be in this competition. Yep. They're not there yet, but how they're... And you look at Colby McKercher from North Melbourne, and his first couple of touches, some sharp hands in tight, and then steps onto his left, use the ball well, and you sort of go, wow, there's something to really like here. Yep. North Melbourne fans, and we said it on the day, would be absolutely pumped with what they've got, where they're going. I know structurally they now can build on the structure of the team from a key personnel rather than the smaller type midfielder or the big body mid, which they do have now. They played him at half back, McKercher. Yep. And defensively, yeah, he's still got a bit of work to do from that point of view, and he's still learning their system. But they gave him the ball to kick out straight away. Off you go. He looked like Anthony Stevens. It was brilliant from behind, number 10. It was good to watch. And then you got Zane Dersma, who, floating across the pack.
Yeah, that was good, wasn't
it? Yeah, you see things in Dersma's game that you go, okay, it's going to be set up for an unbelievable career. 2 goals, 1 in his first game. Should have kicked 3, missed an easy set shot. But then you go, there's still elements that he doesn't have that burst yet, or a real power sort of run from one side of the ground to the other. And when that comes into his game, look out, because on the flip side, you've got Toby Green, who's similar in some ways, but then you've got, if he can get the run of a Brett Daniels, for example, who's just up and back and busy and everywhere, and he brings that into his game, he's going to be nearly unstoppable in terms of the positioning and what he can do as a player on the ground and in the air. It was exciting to watch.
I've got a list. I've got Richmond down here, Kane, and it's a new segment, very short.
Ooh.
Jono's upset of the round.
Boys,
And
close.
last week, I'm giving you a tick.
I think that's a
It was
tight.
tight,
I'm giving
wasn't
you
it?
a tick for Richmond against Carlton, because with
Couldn't
injuries,
believe it.
It's courageous.
without injuries, you get up.
Yeah, I give you that.
I agree
too,
with
Jono. Yeah.
I totally
so that's a
agree with
tick.
that. Of course, I agree with that,
Yeah.
Gerard.
Well, if you had have taken with the points, you would have won the money. So I want you, before you leave us, to figure out your upset for
To
the
go
week
for
this week.
to go for another one this weekend. Yeah,
I
that's
just thought
fine.
you might
We
have gone
can
for North Melbourne.
this weekend
Yeah.
against Fremantle travelling.
Anyway, I'm
All right, let's have- all right,
I'm not
okay.
putting words in your mouth. Have a think about it. We'll
Let's
get
have
it
a-
before you leave.
I'll have
us.
a good
there's
look at that.
There's a couple of options, I think. So Adelaide, Geelong, you probably say it's 50-50. But you could go for North Melbourne over Fremantle. That would be an upset. Hawthorn over Melbourne would be a genuine
Big
Massive
upset.
upset.
Essendon over Sydney would be an upset.
Big upset.
And Richmond over Port Adelaide, would
Adelaide.
be an upset. So you've probably got 4
Well,
genuine
that's not
upset options.
That's not going West Coast over GW.
No, I won't
It's
don't
enormous.
even include that.
That comes up in yes, no,
Speaking of
Richard.
GWS, you saw them live, Jono.
Jono.
What did you make
What-
of them?
Well, the main thing to come out of this game for me was the 25 marks inside forward 50. So that's a massive number. It's a record for GWS. So they've got down there, obviously, Hogan, Riccardi. They've got Toby Green, Callum Brown and Cadman as probably their main aerial threats. And then you've got Daniels, who just floats. He takes the uncontested marks, usually inside forward 50. So going across the competition and the round, Blues v Richmond had 13-10, Pies and Swans 9 and 19. So Swans are moving the ball well also and getting great representation inside forward 50. Essendon and Hawthorn sat at 14 and 19. 19 for Hawthorn's a big number as well. Cats and Saints were 15-11. Suns and Crows were 8 and 4. So it wasn't. I know the conditions weren't
horrible.
great. So therefore that plays there. Dogs and D's were 12 and 13. Freo Brisbane were 12 and 10. I left Port Adelaide to West Coast. Port Adelaide and West Coast were 25-8. So Port Adelaide in the same boat. And yes, you've got to look at the personnel who they're playing. The West Coast Eagles, who are going to be bottom 4 team, and North Melbourne for GWS being a bottom 4 team. So that comes to the challenge for them, these two teams in particular, that as they play better opposition, if they're starting to get that sort of looks inside forward 50 and can convert those to marks to set shots or from those positions, then they're going to be even stronger again. And that's why I think the Sydney Swans 19 against Collingwood is a massive number from a marks inside forward 50.
Yeah, and a fair few of those were basically just on the end of Joe the Goose over the top. So they were chest marks. They were
Right.
unpressured.
Yeah.
But going up to the first guy you mentioned, Daniel Ricciardo, he could have kicked 5 goals in the first quarter last week.
He was, but this is the thing. The week before, it wasn't his turn. At the start of this game, it was his turn, and he made the most of it, because then, as the game grinded away, it was Jesse Hogan who was the one who ended up probably becoming the
Accuracy
the star
cost
of the
him a
forward
couple.
line.
He had some opportunities.
He had a couple of big opportunities, but that's great, isn't it? Because Cadman can play his role and continue to evolve as the probably the fourth at the moment. Because Callum Brown is probably sitting as the third in the air, and he's kicked 7 goals for the year, got his 5, got a 2, so that's just consistent, and he might hold his spot in the rolling. So Toby Green's the one who's probably down the most in terms of complete output across the game.
Which is frightening.
It's
One goal in 2 weeks.
Yeah, but
It's another question off yes, no with Jono.
I think he
gone.
kicked 4 points maybe on the weekend though, 3 or 4
he did,
points.
0
So he's still,
goal.
he's
He's
still
playing
having the
better.
shots.
He's playing better than what his numbers are suggesting.
Yep.
And Cadman is playing a bit of ruck. So, I'm questioning whether they can play the 4 of them in the same side. But right now, It's looking pretty dangerous. We had a split sports day this week, Jono. So it was absolutely split. Gerard thought James Sicily, you can't kick anyone, all right? You deserve a week for kicking. And I would say the majority of people agree with Gerard. My point of view was it has to be a reportable offence, so stupid to do it, but didn't think there was enough force. I was happy with the outcome. You've got the deciding vote.
So my thought on this is that I always go to the reaction of the opposition players. When we played the game, if someone did a low act in terms of either kicking someone or something more severe than that, the reaction of the group of players around that says it all to me, because you can push and shove with something happens, but if someone does something like a perceived kick, then it's game on with a bit more force in your reaction to that scenario. So you would have given him 2. So you look at the Essendon players. There was 5 or 6 around James Sicily. Yes, he put McGrath on the deck, and that was McGrath running at him, and he was stronger there, but he threw his leg at him. He kicked him as far as I'm looking at the vision. But the reaction of the Essendon team mates around McGrath wasn't that McGrath got bumped to the deck. It was McGrath got kicked. Yeah. That was the reaction that they all saw and came in with speed and a semi sort of aggression in the AFL world to pull him away from the scenario, try and rough him up a little bit.
Make the point.
So
it's unacceptable.
Exactly right. It's unacceptable. So for me, that's where it sits. When players see something, they react in a really strong way. And I thought the Essendon players reacted quick and sharply to something they saw. And that probably sums it up for me where it should sit in the context of the competition.
I like it. You made a nice case, but then I interviewed McGrath on Monday and he says, I hardly felt
it. I know that, but
we know that's irrelevant.
The players will
You can throw the biggest haymaker of all time, if it just brushes the nose.
I don't think that's the case now. I think players are more...
I think it is with some players
open to say that they felt like they were wronged.
But it mightn't have been forceful, but it's still the action for me. And it's the action that's picked up by the Essendon players around. So, what if one of those Essendon players comes in and supports his teammates and he gets rubbed out then, which I've seen before in the game.
It's hard to me to sort of compute that he gets off and Hewitt gets off, and there was one last week that was just as innocuous, and he gets a week. It was Redmond.
Redmond cops the week. Harms cops the week
for what? For a little nose.
Well, but it's still classed as a. It's still
classed as a headbutt. I
don't think Harms meant to headbutt Stephen May. I thought it was just a little bit sort of clumsy in his approach to push forward hard on his old teammate. But the reality is,
Jeff's had a wobbly start.
Yeah. So therefore, look, they were adjudicated right, I thought, by the MRO. They got a week. Well, Sicily got a week. He was just good enough to go and fight the impact charge at the tribunal. So
I like that of Michael Christian though. Just keep dishing them out, and if you get beaten at the tribunal,
you get beaten. Yeah, exactly right.
All right, we'll move on because you were part of the coverage where Sarah Jones interviewed Max Gawn and Clayton Oliver, and it's been well received. And his performance was excellent. Jono, what did you make of it?
Oh, it was outstanding, his performance, number one. He started on the bench, 5 minutes on the pine, and by quarter time he'd had about 11. So he was well and truly in great form, Clayton Oliver. I just thought the way that, and it's a real positive here to Sarah, I think she handled the interview extremely well, asked some great questions of both Max and of Clayton, and I think it was done in a great way too by Melbourne, putting both up together with Sarah. And I thought she did an awesome job. So that's number one. And then I thought Clayton answered the questions really well that we've heard about. He also spoke about, he ended up going to where he was going to go to this week with, who do you think's going to come to you? And he's like, Finn McGuinness straight away. The only problem with that is that I watched Finn McGuinness in the Amy game against the Dogs. And he played in the back pocket. But he did come on as sub on the weekend and go into the midfield. So I suppose there may be a point there if Finn actually holds his spot that he could go back into the midfield, he could go forward. So, but it's interesting, isn't it, a player's mindset? They're done, but they're thinking
forward.
Well, they're thinking about, did Finn McGuinness get me last time? Probably did. I need to start thinking about this guy a little bit earlier than
Well, he definitely got him, didn't he? Kicked into, I think, teens.
So,
he wouldn't have been tagged very often in his career.
The very best players hate getting beaten twice. Yeah. If they get you once, then they're thinking about you a bit earlier. So it's straight back onto Finn here. If he does play, or if they do go to Clayton Oliver with him, that Clayton's done some work, Finn. So you might want to have that in the back of your own
Does
mind.
Finn McGuinness go there, Kane?
Yeah, I think he will. I got just a slight concerns on the finisher, Finn McGuinness. I'm not sure there's a role for him unless he's playing that run with role, and they're conscious of it. So there's no fault here for Finn or Hawthorn because they're trying to expand him, play him half back, play him as a midfielder in his own right. He's not a sub. He's not the impact player that you need as sub, and we saw that in hot conditions on the weekend. So if he's not tagging, for me, he doesn't play. But you're right, Jono. You always think, I used to think sort of 1-2 weeks out of the opponents coming up next, and as soon as that game finished, you think about who you're trying
Don't
to
worry, they're thinking about you as well, Causey.
maybe.
Absolutely,
but
they
it's
were.
rare. Like, I think it's good for the game to have a genuine matchup. It's like we see with the Ruckman. To have a genuine matchup that the fans can walk away from that game going, I saw them playing each other and A beat C, or A beat B.
Yes.
And then to get a definitive answer on that. I think we miss a little bit of that, particularly in the midfield. I think the game has lost a bit of an element in that. Flying through your observations, John Owen, what a game it is tomorrow night. What an absolute ripper. And you want to speak about the teams.
Oh, the teams are in, which is great. And for St Kilda, they get some experience back into their lineup. Zach Jones comes in. But the big one for the Saints is Jack Sinclair back into the lineup. Lance Collard goes out.
Brad Crouch.
And Brad Crouch goes out. And we said it the same way, Kane, because it is omitted. He only had, what did he have on the weekend? 15 disposals, 6 and 9. Last year, he finished with 651 for the season.
Nearly 30 a game.
Exactly. So
it's a big accent given it's only 1 week.
Well, there must be some other things that he just didn't align with from what Ross is asking.
Maybe he's just not fit enough. We know Ross. His preparation through summer, I don't think, was great. Had some niggles and was injured and definitely didn't get the full pre-season.
Well, it has to be deeper than that, Kane, because surely he had some runs on the board to last more than round one. So it's got to be deeper, as you said, than just his output of 15 disposals last week. There's got to be something more underlying.
There was some criticism over his defensive work. We all saw the documentary where Matthew Nick says, if you don't want to defend, pack your bags and get out. That was at Brad Crouch, but he worked hard on that. He's been a good player for the Saints. But
he's been very good.
We speak about their mix through the midfield, and we just spoke to Michael Whiting about Gold Coast's mix and how much better it looks now with Flanders is involved in that and Rao gone to a new level and Miller's defensive running and Anderson. Saints have got to get their midfield mix right because it hasn't been right and it's been a bit one-paced. Zach Jones has got speed, so he comes in and he gives you a bit more zip and then Sinclair across half-back. So that looks good. Now the Pies have made some changes as well. Billy Frampton is in, no surprises there. Tom Mitchell and Reef McGuinness is in. Ash Johnson was omitted straight after the game. Charlie Dean's not up to it. John Noble's been omitted and Will Hoskin-Elliott managed. What do you make of those?
I think the Reef McGuinness had to occur, and
so did Billy Frampton.
Yeah, exactly. And look, Tom Mitchell was managed last week, but straight back into the coalface where they need that harder, more experienced body in around the contest to feed out and get some of the runners going on the outside. Reef McGuinness is a really good watcher. His trial game against Richmond he came on in the second half was okay. He showed some good signs in terms of his natural ability as a forward. So hopefully he can put one together and really get himself going and stay in the lineup for at least 3 to 4 weeks and give himself a real opportunity to get a bulk of work in. So I think more for himself, no one on the outside, but more for himself on how his confidence can rise in this competition.
Tell you what became a new thing. I've never seen it done before in footy. In round one, coaches dropping players in the post-match. It happened twice.
You know what,
Jared? At least you know where you're at.
I
straight away.
On the way home from the game, it just used to happen to coincide. The timing was about right where they'd replay the coach's media conference on the radio. You used to listen in, and sometimes your name would get mentioned. I'm not sure that's a great reflection of his thoughts on my game. Imagine if you're driving home as a player and you hear you've been dropped on the radio.
You've been gone. I mean, Andrew Gaff got dropped in the post-match. And so did Alex Johnson.
You're going pretty bad if you get dropped straight after. You're going really, before the coaches even watch the game back on review, you're not going well
at
all.
When you're a wingman, you've got 4 possessions.
And subbed
out.
Yeah.
I think it was a strong statement from Simo. I mean, clearly Gaff's been a fantastic player for a long time over there.
Not for a while though, Gerard. He's been
he didn't have a great year last year, but it's I mean, this is his last year of contract, so he's got some work to do.
Johnny Noble's fighting for a spot in this team.
Yeah.
He didn't play last week. He's been named as omitted.
He has too.
Yes. And
You sure he didn't
and
play
I've
last week?
double-checked
Wasn't he sub last week?
I've double-checked well, he could have been. Finn McRae was sub last week.
That's
So
right. I think he played.
I'm looking here at the lineup of last
It's a bad
week.
game when you get dropped and you haven't played.
He didn't run hard
You
enough.
sure about that?
Post game. I'm sure. I'm
I'm
double
sure
checking
he
now.
played. I'm
He
checking
didn't
this one.
play.
Okay. Yep.
I'm double checking here.
Super producer saying he didn't play.
Didn't play.
He's a Collingwood man. He knows more
You're
about Collingwood
going
than
well
Craig
if you
McRae.
dropped and you didn't play.
Yeah, exactly.
Bad game.
It is. And then you've got Seb Ross playing his 200th, Ryan Burns playing his 50th, Nick Dacos, 50 games.
It's a big 50.
All right,
Well, it's a big 50, but it just seems quick, doesn't it?
Let's move on because Gerard and I chatted about James Rowbottom on Monday, and you've got some thoughts as well, Jono.
Oh, it was just, and look, Gerard, I'm glad Gerard did talk about him on Monday morning. We did the game together, but it was just his first probably 4 or 5 actions in the game that
powerful.
They were powerful, but they set a strong tone for everyone else in the midfield. I think from a Sydney point of view, yeah, they got some runners and they got some ball winners that love to go forward and break 50, but without his grind and aggressiveness and ability to stop the opposition, which you love, Gerard, in that part of the ground was outstanding, and it just deserved reward and a mention more than anything. And that's all this really is. It's just that you've got some players in your team that don't get the limelight, and I'm glad he's got some this week because without his efforts early in that game that got Sydney going, got Heaney and Warner into the contest, it might have been a different sort of outcome early on.
His tackle on to go, he was absolutely superb. He came at 100 miles an hour, and it's actually a good one because it raised the debate about prior opportunity. If that's not play on, knocked out in the tackle, then prior opportunity is dead.
Yeah.
And it was a good decision.
Yeah, exactly. So we talk about Warner all the time. We'll pump up Isaac Heaney for his great start to the year, and we'll look at Errol Goulden and his use of the ball, but Florin off the half back line. But James Rowbottom, he's your grind.
He's your blue-collar worker out there, but he's a high-quality blue-collar.
Very much so.
So it does beg the question with Adams and Mills and Parker, like where they all sit in this midfield, because, I mean, Rowbottom's not going anywhere, and he's sort of your defensive Mills type of midfielder. Mills
has got the ability to go to half back if he wants to, doesn't he?
And wing too. I mean, he's been named on the All-Australian team on the wing, I think. Mills, some would say that doesn't.
So Adams
that doesn't matter a lot.
becomes. So Robbie Fox is playing a really interesting role at the moment.
He
for
got
them.
Quainer.
And I know that John Longmire's really happy with his role in the side. So that probably becomes the Adams side of things, whether Adams goes and plays a high half forward role in behind the contest,
That's why he left Collingwood.
which he can do, and it's what those players will do that will eventually come back.
Yep.
It puts pressure on Matt Roberts, the youngsters, Braden Campbell, that Will Haywood at times.
Yep.
That I don't think John Longmire wants them out of the team because the fact of where they're developing to as players, and Matt Roberts was rising star in round 0, I think it was, first game of the year.
Yep.
So therefore, that it just becomes a really interesting debate, I think, within match committee of Sydney once these players are fit and coming back. Not so much for Mills and Parker, but the newcomer in Taylor Adams and his exact role within this club.
What do you think about the weapons off half-back? So Heaney was big on this last night, Jono, about teams attacking from the back half. And I said to Gerard, I was just happened to be down at Port Adelaide today, and you walk past Ryan Burton, then in one breath, then you walk past Dan Houston, then I go past Kane Farrell, and I go,
Look at you name dropping.
Well, there's 3 of...
What were you doing down there? Some goal kicking?
Bogey's 350.
Good on
Thanks
you,
for
mate.
listening to the program off the top, John. I appreciate that. No, it was Bogey's 350, so it was just good to go down there.
How good's that?
It was off the back of Heaney mentioning that it's a real weapon for teams now scoring from their back half, and we saw it in round 1, and not necessarily...
Well, Sinclair's such a big input.
Sinclair's a huge what the Lizard, your man's been doing for a long time.
Lockie Whitfield's probably the number one in this, though.
He's up there.
I
I think Blakey's
think a
number
couple
one.
have gone
I think
past him.
Blakey's
You reckon?
one. Yeah, and Houston's not far behind Blakey.
Well, Whitfield's first couple of weeks have been
Hasn't
really
got
good.
targets.
No, he's been pretty good. Well, watching him live on the weekend, I was pretty impressed with him.
Okay.
So
anyway, who's got the
Good
most
debate. Who's
and
got that?
best crop of attacking ball users off half-back? I think the kicking's become a bit more of a weapon than what it once was. Heaney said sort of 1 goal a game. I think that may rise this year with teams taking a few more risks and working out the rules from kick-outs and doing that a little bit better.
That's the scary thing about Collingwood. If you had have asked us before the start of the season who's the most attacking group off half-back, you basically go quickly Collingwood. And yet, if they have attacked, they haven't hit targets and had the ball kicked straight over their head. They've got to get their quality run back. And the fact that Isaac Quainer has had an average start to the season because he's had somebody trying to stop that attack is a whole new ball game for him.
Oh, it's massive for Isaac Quainer. That's tough to handle. It takes an adjustment. It takes weeks to get your head around it because you're searching for that to play your way, and the oppo aren't going to let you do it. And if it works once and twice, it's going to come week 3, week 4 because they see that as an opportunity to be able to beat you as a team.